So good afternoon, good morning, I guess, isn't it? And welcome to the 2017 LDI show. Honestly, I am thrilled to be here to deliver a keynote address at this year's show. It's not my first keynote address. I've given a number of them over the years. And I must confess, I'd be lying if I didn't say, really what I'd rather do is sit down with all of you over a couple of beers and talk about 25 years of touring with Tom Petty. That's what I'd rather sit down and talk to you about. But we got business to talk about. I've been kind of looking forward to giving this speech since being asked to do so, because it's going to allow me to use this platform to kind of go on the record with some feelings I have about certain trends and practices that are taking root today in the live sound industry. Now, I'm fully aware this is a pretty diverse show. I mean, we have lots of different production elements here, but I'm going to focus almost entirely on audio today. And given that we're all part of that medium, I think a lot of this will resonate with you. As an industry, we have certainly transitioned technologically throughout the years, right? But culturally, we've also experienced and continue to experience some harsh realities and the growing pains from those adolescent years as a cottage industry to now maturing into a full-fledged manufacturing industry filled with demands and expectations we never could have dreamed of. Live sound, as anybody who's sitting in this room knows, any of you guys that have done this, is a hands-on, it's an eyes-up, it's an in-the-moment workflow that has evolved into a highly professional medium of users who have very unique demands and place them squarely on the shoulders of the product manufacturers. Products and processes that serve a concert industry that has now fully morphed from the underground gathering place of the counterculture to living front and center in the mainstream of today's culture. All of this comes with upsides and downsides. The hope is that we as users and manufacturers can balance those upsides and downsides into a creative and trouble-free experience for the professional end user, a profitable and a healthy business outcome for the modern manufacturing sector, and of course, meaningful and enjoyable experiences for the concert goer, who ultimately, all of us are there to serve, right? So right now in 2017, these lofty goals are very, very challenging to meet. Today's environment is, honestly, it's negatively competitive. It's turbulent. It's confrontational. At times, it's just downright divisive. And in being such, it ends up being counterproductive to the ends that we as pros are all striving for. Modern high-tech manufacturers and a new wave of professionals freshly established in the market nearly always strive to be progressive. They always strive to rapidly push the technological boundaries. And naturally, that is going to pit them against the established, stalwart manufacturers supported by conservative factions of veteran professionals who not only want technological progress to slow down, but seemingly carry desires to revert it back to the way things were done decades ago. So I pulled together this little slide here for you. I grabbed this. Yeah, we're going to go there. I'm not scared to go there. These are some snippets that I've pulled from social media, over the past kind of week getting ready for this speech. And I think you're going to be fascinated by this. I'm sure it's not going to surprise anybody that this kind of division lives in pro audio, but here we go. So as I say, these are actual comments that I pulled from the internet. So you can see here that on the left, you have guys that are clearly conservative in nature. They do not want to move forward into the new technology, while at exactly the same time, we have guys that are completely embracing it here. Here's another set, right? So it just goes right on down the line here. I'll just blow them out so you guys can see these and read them. Like I said, these are actual comments from the web. So, we have clearly two complete factions in play here. Which one would you label progressive? Which one would you label conservative? So you thought politics was the only place that this kind of stuff is happening, right? It's actually happening with us for sure. So I bring this up simply to illustrate the divisiveness that the current era of disruption is bringing out in the live sound industry. Before the current technology crossfades, where did this level of divisiveness or conflict reside? I don't remember it ever being as intense as it is right now. It's created a serious tug of war in professional audio. If you've been around live sound long enough, it's pretty easy to recognize that we're currently in the midst of the most disruptive technology era in the history of live sound. And in today's environment, we're often weathering a storm where the skies at times can be pretty doggone dark and ominous. Now, for those of you that don't know me or my background, I'm just going to take a minute and give you a little 20,000-foot flyby of where I kind of came from. I have been an active member of the professional audio community since about 1979. I started out working in mid-level recording studios and doing shows with a regional sound company in the Midwest. By the 80s, that work had kind of transitioned into working directly for a number of bands and artists, which has comprised the bulk of my career up to and including today. Later in the decade of the 90s, I spent a fair amount of time as a recording studio owner, a mobile recording services provider, as well as a period of years as a producer and an independent record label owner. So I've been exposed to a wide variety of activities in the music production business, some of them certainly more successful than others. And throughout my career, I've been fortunate enough to work closely with many manufacturers at the consulting level. But then one day, a funny thing happened on the way to the gig. Around the year 2000, I was enlisted to work very closely with Avid Technologies, then known as DigiDesign, to help guide their entry into live sound. About 5 years after that, I actually took a full-time position as a mid-level executive with the unique twist of not only serving as a specialist for the company, but also being encouraged by the company to maintain my level of activities as a concert sound mixer. It was extremely unique, especially for the time. As many of you know, I've worked intimately with Tom and the Heartbreakers for almost 25 years. And in at least 15 of those years, I was also working for Avid Technologies as an executive. That opportunity provided me an extremely unique perspective on the sensibilities of both the end user and the manufacturer, because I held the title of roadie, concert sound mixer, and corporate executive. Very unique. Those titles and their responsibilities could obviously not be more disparate. They provided me insight and access to wildly different perspectives of how professional audio can look from two very different but very meaningful vantage points. And frankly, that alone should give you some insights into what this keynote is going to be about today. Now, after approaching about 4 decades in professional audio, I've borne witness to quite a few milestones over that time, especially in live sound. In the early days of modern concert and festival events, as I mentioned earlier, sound reinforcement operated purely as a cottage industry. Sound providers of the day did not really provide any sort of purpose-built technology for the burgeoning concert market, primarily because the demand was relatively small and it was highly specialized. And frankly, everyone was still in the process of figuring out exactly what concert sound is and what it would be in the coming years. No one knew what it was going to turn into. I'll give you some examples. For example, installed movie theater speaker and amplifier systems were acquired by the burgeoning providers of the day and repackaged for travel and daily stack and splay workflows. Radio, theater, studio mixing, and processing technologies designed and built primarily for single location installation were now being repackaged, re-interfaced, and used in mobile applications. And stage monitors? What the hell are stage monitors? Do we need them? I mean, that was the mindset of the time. And so during this period, the blueprint of what would become the live sound industry was actually being drawn out. As the concert industry began to grow and the contemporary music of the day began to reshape the expectation for the concert experience, The needs of the technicians tasked with supporting these events began to rapidly expand and grow. These needs were first served by the proprietary nature of the sound reinforcement vendors of the day. At this point, a great many of the providers were developed either by pioneers who started their own manufacturing companies after being in the field for many years, or new purpose-built live sound products were being produced by already established manufacturers who were willing to expand their portfolios to include live sound products. Nearly all of these companies, this is important to understand, nearly all of these companies enlisted industry-savvy experts to help drive their company's focus and, more importantly, their design philosophies geared at best serving the users and their unique demands. Many of these startup companies, these little proprietorships, would actually morph into the legendary marquee manufacturers whom we all know and revere, right? That's where they all came from. But here's where we need to stop for a second. It's vital, I think, to stop and understand a couple of key insights about that point in history. First, the vast majority of these burgeoning companies, whether they were proprietorships or expanding established manufacturers, with very few exceptions, were privately owned. They were privately owned. And I'm of the opinion that this one aspect is key to understanding the success of those companies at the time. Because for the most part, they were owned and operated by people who actually worked in the field. Just as in the early days of recording, they were engineering and building their own solutions as needed. Necessity was indeed the mother of invention during this period. The key personnel in these companies often had some sort of real working lineage and day-to-day connection to the people using the equipment for given shows or tours. The path to success for them was simple and right to the point. Conceive and build the better mousetrap. That was the goal of the day. Now, over the coming years, through this transition from cottage industry to formalized manufacturing, we've borne witness to multiple evolutions of speaker system design, from the earliest component-based stack and splay systems to these horizontally arrayed behemoths with multiple full-range enclosures to today's cutting-edge DSP-controlled line sources. We've been witness to the complete journey from comparatively small analog consoles with very limited input and bus counts to the greatly expanded capabilities of the legendary large-frame analog consoles, up to today's digital console offerings that seemingly have no boundaries in terms of capacity or capability. We've watched the microphones move from limited basic offerings to an industry of users who embrace not only purpose-built mics for live sound, but oftentimes are just as likely to pull from an entire range of once considered studio-only microphones. A similar mindset fell into play for processing as well, where front of house and monitor positions were assembling caches of processing technology for shows that would rival the most comprehensive recording studio. And of course, over that time, for me personally, it's been very rewarding in my career to be instrumental in pioneering and driving the convergence of multi-track recording technologies into modern live sound systems to create entirely new workflows, such as daily multi-track archiving and of course virtual sound check that can be directly attributed to improving not only the quality of the audio being presented, but as really the foremost tool for evaluating the skill sets and the abilities of the people mixing today's shows. In the early days, it was often slowly moving in terms of the industry, where companies were economically challenged for research and development dollars. And this made effective product development challenging, and it often moved at a snail's pace. Comparatively, today, we have large, powerful, corporate conglomerates that can offer well-funded, rapidly researched, and developed technologies. But here's the wake-up call. The realities of this power and speed that these powerful corporations offer is not all that rosy. As we're now finding out, working with this kind of urgency can often lead to the temptations to operate in a vacuum and become isolated from the actual users and their day-to-day demands. Very different, completely counter in terms of culture to the cottage industry of previous years. Worse yet, a company can attempt to address numerous adjacent markets with really disparate, unrelated products, and most importantly, it's all built by shared engineering resources. Because of the time and efficiency pressures, the result is often really lightly researched, quickly developed, and poorly tested products rushed to the market. And you know, the challenge with these shared resource models for these big companies is this. Here's the harsh truth that you and I are going to have to deal with in this room, is that live sound moves a very small revenue needle. For these companies that offer all of these other products and work in other adjacent areas, maybe it's lighting, video, whatever, consumer audio, whatever, it's important for us to understand our place in the pecking order. It doesn't matter whether this is a billion-dollar industry. Some of the other industries in that company are probably going to be $10 billion industries. We're going to be the small piece of the pie. And the unfortunate reality of that is, what happens is the company follows the money. Make more money, you'll get more research and development. That's just the hard truth of all of it. So it's put us actually in a really, really tough place here in live sound today, because we've transitioned now completely from the cottage industry to the fully featured manufacturing industry, where we're actually the low man on the totem pole now, not the primary focus. Now, even though I've been extremely fortunate to bear witness to all of this in my own professional journey, please don't be tempted to interpret this as I've somehow seen it all. I assure you I have not. But those experiences that I've been through as both end user and manufacturer give me a perspective. They give me a perspective as a high-end user and a high-end product developer, and that is maybe a singular perspective. That perspective has provided me the motivation on many occasions, like on days like today, to stop and take a look around and soberly analyze what we're currently demanding as users, and in turn, building as manufacturers. It's an opportunity to coldly and objectively examine where we might be headed. Because in the past 15 years, if I have learned anything while in this business, it's two axioms here. As end users, oftentimes what we think we want does not turn out to be what we actually need. And as manufacturers, what we think the end user needs is not at all what they want. All right? So those two truths have been in play for the biggest portion of my career, and they've been very, very hard to discover and digest. So again, today I thought it might be worth stopping and taking that breath and kind of peeking back over our shoulders and examining where we collectively are on November 18th, 2017. And maybe we'll make this kind of a concert sound State of the Union address, if you will, okay? So let's take a few minutes to examine the good, the bad, certainly the ugly, in an effort to figure out if we might just be better served by stopping every now and then, taking one tiny step back in order to truly take two steps forward. As an industry, we have been charging forward for so long now that we've ended up in a period where, as end users, our yearning for more and more capabilities has driven the manufacturers to release products with unprecedented speed to the market. And oftentimes, with speed, mistakes are made. I'm of the opinion that this type of urgency has been used as a rationale to quietly and quickly undermine a set of long-standing virtues and values that are key to producing successful products. Successful products used at successful shows in front of millions of people, night after night after night throughout the world. Okay? So, do you believe that a set of shifting values and virtues can be at the root of all of our problems? Can it be that simple? Well, check this out.
You wrote to me once, listing the 4 chief virtues: wisdom, justice, fortitude, and temperance. As I read the list, I knew I had none of them. But I have other virtues, Father. Ambition, That can be a virtue when it drives us to excel. Resourcefulness, courage, perhaps not on the battlefield, but there are many forms of courage. Devotion to my family, to you. But none of my virtues won your list.
So as you can see, even the Roman Empire shifted their values and their virtues over time. Everybody remember what happened to the Roman Empire? Right. So this can be at the root of our problems, and I'm going to submit to you today that it actually is. Now, I'm going to pause right here for a second just to take a cue to help us through this from one of my favorite writers and columnists in my lifetime, George Will. George, as you know, is a staunch, traditional political conservative. But I don't let that sway me from his writings, and frankly, neither should you, because he's also extremely intelligent and insightful. And most importantly, he's one of the greatest and most engaging baseball historians alive today, which of course gets him a pass from me, being the self-proclaimed moderate and baseball fan. George posed a concept when writing about modern politicians and government that I'm going to share with you today because I think it's actually relevant to today's discussion. Now, everybody, go easy here. Don't start tweeting out that Scovill's gone all politico and wacko here, but George actually posed a very salient set of thoughts on the idea that virtues and values are often confused for one another. As you can see here, virtues are habits, difficult to develop and therefore not equally accessible to all. Values, on the other hand, are an equal opportunity business. They are mere choices. So I'm going to give you my interpretation of this. My interpretation is that virtue is the underlying makeup of what you and I, and for the context of this speech today, product manufacturers and sound reinforcement providers and end users are made of. The virtues are what we're made of. And conversely, values are the choices we make as a function of those virtues. Okay? So play the game with me here. What do you think the virtues of the manufacturing sector in pro audio should be? Accountability, honesty, humility, loyalty, integrity, dependability, trustworthiness, right? You see, there are hundreds of them. I mean, you could list out a ton of them. There are also tons of examples of values. What would they value with any one of those virtues? Revenue, profit, notoriety, stature, leadership, winning. You see where I'm heading? And you see the difference? It's subtle, but it's meaningful. And I can stand here before you and without question say this. We can use our friend Commodus as the example here if we want. What you value as a manufacturer is directly dependent upon how squared away your virtues are. Okay? So whether we're talking about personal or professional lives or the businesses we're going to build, it's vital to understand the difference between these two often misused and misapplied words because they have far-reaching and deep-reaching consequences to the quality of a person's life or the work that they produce in the field, to how effectively a company is going to approach designing, building, and selling products to help support a set of users. Users that in the end are their livelihood, right? So with that in mind, I want to introduce you to a couple of terms here that are central to the discussion today because they are the centerpiece of any discussion about technology development for the live sound market, be it past, present, or future. And these terms and concepts are terms that I feel we're, as an industry, we are either losing our grasp of or we have compromised or even value engineered them out of the product manufacturing process, okay? The first one is reliability. Reliability. Reliability in our case, we're going to treat as a value, right? When I consider what I apply the concept of reliability to, I more often than not think of actual physical products. For live sound, products deemed to be reliable by the people who use them perform just as well under extreme conditions as they do under normal conditions. Why? Because that reliability is a function of a purpose-built design. A design coupled closely with an engineering philosophy that takes into full account the environment in which a given technology is going to be asked to perform. The reliability mindset must be addressed at the earliest stages of a design. Reliability can rarely, if ever, be built into a product after it's released. A product's reliability can only be fully accounted for with keen insight from the conception team and designers who carry a laser-accurate knowledge into what the product is actually going to be asked to endure on a day-to-day basis. In fact, in many cases, reliable products are often over-engineered to ensure that they can endure any foreseeable challenges and in turn work day to day. So in summary on reliability, in my field of vision, reliability relates directly to a physical product. And the design and execution of a reliable product can only come from a culture of insightful and well-informed, empathetic design philosophies. Anything short of that is likely not to produce a product suitable for mission-critical live sound applications. Okay? So our next term is dependability. Now, while it's a given that this is synonymous with reliability, I actually parse this into two separate and distinct piles. In this case, I'll position dependability as a virtue, right? When I think about dependability, I don't think about physical product. I think more about the company, the people, and the culture that is manufacturing the product. Here's an example. I'll give you a few examples here. For example, are they a dependable company? As an end user, can I depend on the design and engineering teams to fully grasp the demands and challenges that I'm going to face with my work? As an end user, can I depend on the company to design products that are easy to learn, easy to use, easy to implement, but still comprehensive enough to tackle the challenges at hand? As a sound for hire provider, can I depend on that manufacturer to embrace the idea that their performance of their products directly impacts my company's brand? As a sound for hire provider, can I depend on the company to be a business ally and also be savvy enough to ensure their own success and longevity in order to protect my investment in them? And finally, as a professional and a business owner, can I depend on the manufacturer to strive to become a citizen of the industry and support standards and education and drive the industry forward as opposed to parasitically just feeding off of it? You see what I'm driving at? Is the company dependable? Here's how I might use the two terms in unison to kind of drive the point home. Is it realistic to expect reliable products from a company that is not dependable? Is it sane to believe they're going to do that? I start to question that. The final term I want to share with you today is actually a mindset that feeds the overall philosophy. It relates not only to fluent understanding of the technology you're designing, but more importantly, where and how it's actually going to be used. This is a concept that we have let slip through the cracks in the transition from cottage industry to modern manufacturing industry. And that term is on air. On air. To my line of thinking, even though concert sound is not a broadcast medium in the strictest of definition, live sound absolutely demands an on-air mindset and approach, not only by manufacturers, but by the people that are operating in live sound. Live sound certainly checks all the appropriate boxes in order to meet the definition of on-air. As an example, if there is a pre-designated start time for an event that cannot be at risk or disrupted by technical failure, that's an on-air environment, right? As an example, any technology or system that is at risk of disrupting an event for any number of living, breathing audience members should be deemed unacceptable. That's an on-air mindset. These are just a couple of the hallmarks of the on-air philosophy in technology and system designs. And in the run-up through history that I've been describing to you today, everyone involved in the era of the cottage industry implicitly understood the concept of live sound being an on-air environment, whether they called it as such or not. And shows would be, as shows would be attended by more and more people, the stakes became higher and higher. The emphasis on respecting the sensibilities of the on-air mindset and all the design and integration demands to support such a mindset would come to the very forefront of the industry. The cottage industry lived and breathed the idea that live sound products must be held to a higher standard of reliability than traditional audio products. The products simply had to work every day, many times under unimaginable conditions, in which afterwards it would get thrown in the back of a truck, travel some distance, and be asked to do it all over again tomorrow. And after setting it up the next day, if it did not work, a replacement had to be immediately accessible, or someone needed to be immediately accessible to help you get it back on air, with a sense of urgency, no less. Meaning the company that made and provided the technology also had to be dependable. And so in 2017, the modern manufacturing era for live sound, I'm going to give you my first example of the vanishing virtue of dependability in live sound. Here we are, smack dab in the middle of the information age, an age where everyone, and I mean everyone, is connected seemingly 24 hours a day. That is, unless you need to reach a product manufacturer and speak to a human being who actually understands your product, your workflow, and more importantly, the urgency with which you need a solution to your problem. Fewer and fewer of our manufacturers are offering this required level of support, and my fear is because they don't fully embrace and, more importantly, revere the on-air mindset needed to support these types of products. Now, I'll fully concede, I'll give them a little bit of a break here. I'll fully concede that the demands for competent and immediate tech support by a population of live sound professionals who are regularly in a different location every day, many times international locations, would be incredibly challenging for a corporation of any caliber to deploy. However, it is vital for live sound manufacturers to first fully embrace the extreme global nature of the live sound market, where the customers may need to initiate an urgent technical support interaction from literally anywhere on the planet. How many of today's companies are actually prepared to tackle that challenge? Not many, not many. I assure you, though, that the concept of outsourcing this responsibility to a technician trained to search and read from a knowledge database during your call is not adequate tech support, and certainly not for the model of an on-air technical environment. I don't think it ever will be, in my estimation. So another behavior I see trending in the wrong direction and also represents a loss of reverence for the on-air nature of the live sound industry is with the current development and release schedules for new digital live sound consoles and processing. Because these are extremely complex and long developing software-driven hardware products, the temptation can exist for manufacturers to release these products well before they are feature complete. And at times even before they are adequately tested, no less. For the company's perspective, this approach is logical and is a means to faster revenue and in turn profits. It ensures the longevity of interest and focus on the product because it will be presented with numerous and scheduled feature updates all throughout its lifespan. However, here's the hard truth again. Here's the reality, and it is that that approach falls flat on its face with regard to honoring an on-air nature of the environment that the product will be working in. Let's try to drive it home this way. I'll use a metaphor to kind of try to get this point across. You can't be building the airplane while you're flying it, especially when it's full of people, right? It just does not work in that environment. It may work for other areas of the manufacturing sector and other products, but for on-air live sound, we simply cannot be put in that position. And frankly, that's what it feels like every manufacturer is asking us as mixers and engineers to do when we subscribe to and support their products in 2017. And frankly, this approach is not particular to the pro audio industry. It's by all accounts happening in nearly all the high-tech industries. And as such, it's producing an amazing side effect on the users as a whole, where crashes are happening with such regularity that the result is that we are normalizing failure. We are normalizing failure as a world culture right now. People have become so accustomed to the crash that it's now not only accepted, but it's even somewhat expected, right? It's just the craziest things. Industry veterans like me, especially ones that predate the computer era, are mortified by the thought of a systems crash. We're scared to death of it. But the newer generation of people seem to be pretty well acclimated to the concept of technology failure and don't get so easily spooked by it. They seem acclimated to it, and if for no other reason, that reboots seemingly happen every day. We've grown just normalized by them. Our phones, our Wi-Fi networks, our computers, our iPads, our TVs, all made by today's most reputable manufacturers, crash seemingly every day. So if that's the case, should we actually expect anything different from live sound technologies, many of which use similar underlying technologies? I was going to share a little anecdote with you today. I think I'm actually going to do it here because we got time. On the most recent Tom Petty tour, the 40th anniversary tour, we were doing a large show in Seattle. We were playing at Mariners PNC Stadium there. Probably, honestly, 50, 60,000 people there. One of the largest shows we had done on the tour. And we had a failure. We had a network failure, an audio transport failure. And we ended up having to reboot the network in order to get it back online. Now, this is in front of 60,000 people. The system was down for maybe 5-8 minutes. And for any of you that have traveled and mixed outside of the U.S., maybe in South America, places like that, in those situations, you understand my life might be in danger right now if I don't get this PA system back on, right? But as I sat there and we kind of worked the problem, we kind of identified it and got it on, for some reason, I took note of the atmosphere that was around me. I was sitting in the middle of 60,000 people. And of course, there was a couple of the drunk frat guys, by me, giving us a hard time, yelling at us, trying to get it back online. But on whole, that audience sat there politely, chatted to themselves, as if they knew it was going to come back. They were positive it was going to come back. Oh, we're just going to reboot and get the show back going. I was absolutely struck by it. And I thought, wow, we are in a different time here. Now, I also had the anxiety of thinking, okay, the internet's going to be blowing up right now. It's going to be blowing up. Everyone's going to think they knew what happened. They know what's happened. They've got it all sussed, what we should have done, what we didn't do, everything. But surprisingly, it wasn't. It was surprisingly quiet. I feel blessed over it because we could have gotten flamed terribly. Now, I'll say this, in my 20 plus years with Tom Petty, that's the first non-man-made, not human error, system failure that we ever had over the course of hundreds upon hundreds of shows. But it caught me. It was one of those things where, wow, how were we not ready for that, So I was just struck by how passive everybody was about such a big incident. It's funny, maybe this plays into the conversation. I'll give you a little pettyism here. When things like that happen in front of Petty and it puts him in kind of an awkward spot, et cetera, he would have a tendency to gather us together and And he would look us in the eye and he would go, was somebody trying to save me money again? You know, like, and he kind of had it right. It's like when it comes to those kind of things, there is no expense that goes unaccepted. You know, those are things, those are truly mission critical things that are going to bring a show to a halt. You don't chintz on money there. So, you know, in my journey through life, and both professionally and personally, I've always believed that you cannot improve yourself or your quality of life by taking easy roads. I've also learned early on, probably at the behest of my father, Eldon, to not only accept but actually embrace the fact that not every day is going to be sunny and smooth sailing. There are going to be storms, and you have to be prepared for them. His motto was certainly always that it's too late to prepare once the storm hits. My life memories are filled with these kind of metaphors, like this one provided by my mother and father, and I've used them to great effect in my life. And there's probably no better metaphor for preparing for challenges that will meet in life and business than what I participated in right here in Las Vegas last weekend. For any of you that know me or follow me online or any of those things, you probably know I'm a little bit of an adventure nut. I'm kind of a fitness junkie, and I love extreme sports. I've been drawn to the concept of using extreme sports in my life as a means of developing physical and, more importantly, mental toughness, and then applying that toughness to my personal and professional life, and kind of chasing after challenges, not running away from them. In the extreme sports world, there are no shortage of events where you can test just how well you're prepared mentally and physically. And this year, I again used World's Toughest Mudder as my gauge. For those of you that are not familiar with this event, it's an extreme endurance event, 24-hour obstacle course race, built and conceived by a British counterterrorism officer named Guy Livingstone. It's built significantly to test and hopefully find your limits physically and especially mentally. It's not a competition, but instead is meant to encourage you to face fears through conquering extreme challenging events or obstacles. Challenging enough that many times you actually have to enlist other participants to join you in order to conquer an obstacle and move on. And just as in real life, you have to actually endure penalties if you don't conquer the obstacle. The goal in the end is not to win, but for you and your fellow participants to survive and come out stronger than when you entered because of the test of will and the ability to work together in support of one another. You know, even in this race, most of the laps that you're going to do, you do solo, you do as an individual. But I actually work out and do these kind of things with a group of guys, and we all commit to ourselves to do the last lap together, the last 2.5 hours of the 24 hours together. And we always talk about it. We're always startled about how difficult those solo laps are to do. I mean, they are just grueling, painful things to survive. Yet when we go out as a group and we encourage each other and put it all together, all of a sudden those obstacles don't seem so daunting, right? And as that turns out, it's a beautiful metaphor for what I've been speaking to you about today, because there has never been a time where we've made so many meaningful strides forward in live sound, only to be faced with more and more daunting obstacles. One solution conquered often leads to 2 more obstacles. So the obstacle before us all is, how do we align the expectation between the users and the manufacturers? Because they are clearly slipping farther out of sync today. How do we reboot, clear the cache, and default the preferences for the original virtues and values and create more dependable companies, creating reliable products for our mission-critical on-air situations night after night? How do we entice manufacturers to reset their reverence and reset their willingness to adopt and honor the on-air standard of product development for live sound. The first giant step over the obstacle is with effective paths of communication that can create teamwork, right? Effective communication between users and manufacturers, just as it was in the cottage industry days, and just as importantly, effective communication between competing manufacturers. We need our sense of community back in live sound, especially in manufacturing. Trade shows, the likes of LDI, provide a unique, but more often than not, missed opportunity for the users of and the manufacturers of live sound products to gather in the same room and share ideas and concerns. We need to be less concerned with selling the product for a little while and more concerned with building the product correctly. It's actually an opportunity for manufacturers to breathe the same air as their competitors and it presents a real opportunity to find common ground and begin the process of unifying some of these approaches that could not only serve the needs of the companies, but certainly the real needs of all the customers. The players in our industry are currently far too isolated from one another right now, and the customers are the ones taking it in the shorts. You'll forgive me, but that doesn't seem like the best long-term strategy for growth and success in our industry. So with that notion, I urge you, the end users, to seek out the manufacturers and hold their feet to the fire. Hold them to a higher standard. I in turn urge all of the manufacturers to be more open-minded, less prideful, less protective and isolated from one another, and find areas of common ground. Strive to become citizens of the industry who work to see the entire industry grow and prosper. Do that and you ensure its long-term health and prosperity as well as your own. As an industry of professionals, we must get back to a line of thinking that supports the notion, rising tides float all boats. So thank you for this opportunity to speak today. I appreciate your attention this morning. Please go out and enjoy your life. Enjoy your time here at LDI. I hope to see you around the trade show floor. Thank you for your time this morning.